can feel the way you want to do. Wanna feel that groove that moves in you. We can get on down to right now. We can feel this funky, funky town.
Well, I'm going to say good morning and welcome to everyone. Welcome to Kentucky State University Harold R. Benson Research and Demonstration Farm. Again, welcome to our third Thursday workshop. Today we'll be talking about small ruminants. Before we normally start, we normally make a few announcements. We will be having our Small Farms Conference, November the 18th through the 20th at this location. If you would like to register, you could speak with Ms. Savannah Fry at the registration desk, and she'll be glad to assist you. Also, when you registered, one of our presenters today, Dr. Carl, has a very short survey on Small Ruminants Producer Survey. That's the title of it, Small Ruminants Producer Survey. It's a one-pager, but if you would, please, ma'am, and please, sir, participate with that survey. So we're going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on track. Our first presenter is Dr. V, getting started with sheep and goat. So at this time, we're going to give our undivided attention to Dr. V with Kentucky State University. So let's welcome Dr. V.
Good morning. Okay, good. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Dr. Vares. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised on a small dairy farm in the southern province of Rwanda. That's in the East Africa. So growing up, I was very interested in animals because I was raised in a small village. So when I was growing up, I saw many farmers were losing their animals, especially during the dry season. So and we didn't have solutions. So from the start, I was telling my mom, hey, I have to study animal science so I can solve this problem. So I did bachelor's and PhD in animal science, both and undergraduate. I graduated at University of Arkansas. That's where I did my master's and PhD. And I was working in Alabama as an extension specialist for small ruminants. Then I went back home for a couple of years where I was also working on conservation agriculture, especially helping farmers on land restoration and grazing management. So now I'm part of KSU family, And this is going to be my first talk with producers here in Kentucky, and I'm very honored to be here today. So, to start with, our first topic is going to be about getting started with sheep and goats. And I want this to be more interactive and to learn more about you. So within 1 hour, we cannot cover all, but at least if you are interested in starting a goat or a sheep farm, this is going to give you a bit of the picture. But before I move forward, I would like to ask if you are already raising sheep or goats. Could you raise your hands? Wonderful. So if you are here to learn about sheep and goats and your first time and you are considering doing it, could you raise your hands as well? Okay, hopefully I will be able to convince you today. Okay, good. So for those who are raising sheep and goats, I would like to ask, I know this is going to be one of Dr. Carl's questions. If you could share with us, what has been your experience like? What learning curve, or what is something that you found out was important to know before you start your sheep production? Anyone can share with us, like, how has your journey been and what has been the most important to learn when you started the sheep business? Worms? Okay, okay. The parasite? Yeah. Oh, so.
Coccidia in one of them. It had a coccidia.
Oh, coccidia?
Yeah, little sheep. I think she was stressed to be, well, we ended up getting sheep together, and they, we just got them after they were weaned, and I don't know if it was too soon to pick them up.
Ah.
At least we've had issues with parasites.
Yes, yeah. The parasites, especially when it's wet, coccidia, that's where it's going to come. During the rainy season and it's wet, you can get coccidia. Yeah, okay, so that was one of the learning curve about the parasites. So besides the parasites, what else did you find it to know? Like, hey, if I knew this could have helped me. So anything else besides the parasites? Yes, sir.
Well, we have goats, we don't have sheep.
Uh-huh.
We have to, and it's something that we're going to still have to work on, is the weather. Because when it gets very cold and we live on the farm, we're going to have to prepare for this season, for this cold season, to be able to protect the new kids.
Yes, yeah, yes. How to adjust to the weather changes. Especially that comes with the facility management and the facility planning, and with the weather as well. You're going to see that you have it also to think about what are you going to feed them during winter or when you have a forage scarce. Okay, so anyways, so to start with, and thank you very much. And most of you are already in the sheep or goat business. So I was going to start with why sheep and goats, not cows. So I like sheep and goat because mostly the investment you start with is similar comparing to cows, right? And for sheep and goats, the gestation period is about 150 days, 6 months. For cows, it's going to take you 9 months. And the return on investments on cattle is going to take some time, right? But for goats, if you have a small land area, normally we say that whatever a space which can house, one cow can house about 6 to 8 goats, depending on the forage quantity, okay? So I like goats because the return on investment is going to be quick. And goats are suited for grass diets. And it's good, also suitable for small-scale farmers. So that's what I was talking about. So whenever you are planning to start a goat business, so this is what you have to think about. The return on investment is going to be very quick. And also, you will see that as we go, that the forage side or the nutritional content, when we talk about the cattle and the goats, they have more variety of what they eat. So either you are in goat or sheep business, these are certain similarities. And most of the challenge we face, either you are a sheep producer or you find that they're going to be almost the same when you are a goat producer. Like, for example, so fencing is the same. So we are dealing with coyotes, right? So that's something we have to think about. So either you are in goat business or sheep business, you have to start thinking about how are you going to keep those coyotes away, because that's the main issue. We are talking about housing. How are you going to deal with the winter season coming? That's the housing. So that's what we have to think about. The facility is the same. Health care, parasites is the same problem, including parasite management and predator control. So either you are in sheep or goat business or planning to enter that, those are going to be the same challenges that you can find either ways. So, and when we talk about the similarities, we have also to think about the market. As someone from Africa, I would say like in East Africa, goat is the most popular meat that we eat. So if you go, you take like Qatar Airways, what they feed is gonna be lamb. If you take Turkish Airways, it's gonna be lamb as well. So I'm talking about market similarities. Like if you are here in the US, as the population of international people origin comes in, so you will see that your clients will be mostly almost the same, like East Africa or Caribbeans. So that's where you have to think about as you are targeting your market. So it's gonna be the same. So they both also improve pasture by eating invasive species. So we see on the next slide on how the selecting either sheep or goats can help you also to improve your pastures, especially when it comes to weeds management. I think last time, I think we went to, you were here, right? When you went to with Dr. Hines on the farm. So you will see when you go outside that when those cows are eating, normally they start eating grasses. And we have a certain brush which are remaining. So that's where you can even think of putting like multi-species grazing. So because either sheep or goats, they're gonna be very well with controlling invasive species. So now we have seen the similarities. You are planning to start a sheep or goat farm, or you are already a producer. So my talk is going to be mainly basing on the key considerations. What do you have to consider when you start sheep or goat farm? First is to understand like these animals, especially forage selection. So you will see that goats mostly prefer woody plants or brush or shrub and broadleaf over grasses. That's why you call them browsers. So let's say you want to start your business and you have a forest land area. What option will be the best for you? Are you going to buy a horse and put in a farm like this? I don't think it's going to work, right? So, but for goats, it's the best way. So this photo was taken in Alabama. This was in 2021. We were doing a study using goats to control understory vegetation in the forest land area. Okay? So because goats are browsers, yeah, we found like positive results. We were looking on what is the best stocking density and how that is going to affect like the parasite management we were talking about. Because they were eating different forage species, we found out putting the goats eating understory vegetation not only control the understory, but also it improves health status of the goats. So I was saying that sheep prefer to browse grasses, but they also tend to tolerate parasite better than goat. I'm saying not to resist, to tolerate parasite better than goats. So do you know the reason why the sheep will be able to tolerate parasite better than goats? I think Dr. Ray will talk about that afterwards. But for the goats, they are top-down browsers, top-down. So when they eat, they start from the top to the ground. So, but the sheep, they are grazers. They start from the ground. So, and by starting from the ground, and most of the parasites, they are on the ground level, so they develop that immunity at a young age. So while for the goats, if you put them on a pasture like this, so you have to make sure that you are not overgrazing. Because when you overgraze now, they are going to be getting those parasites that they were not accustomed with. And another side is that, so for the goats, since they are top-down browsers, they prefer to browse on tall grasses. So this is a graph shows on the forage height preferences. So like horses, they prefer more on the ground, the cows, sheep, and goats. So how does this translate if you are starting a farm business, especially goat or sheep? You have also to think about how does your farm looks like? What type of forages do you have there? That's why whenever someone calls me, hey, Dr. V, I want to start a goat business or sheep business, I ask you, how does your forage looks like? You have to do vegetation inventory and you see, hey, my vegetation this high, I have this certain species, and that will dictate you what type of animals are going to be on your farm. This is one of the studies which has been done. That was in 2012. So they were trying to see like forage preferences of different livestock species, either grasses, weeds, and browse or shrubs. So you can see, if you take a horse on a farm and you have grasses, browsing, and weeds, so 90% of what you're going to choose is going to be grasses. So that's why you cannot take a horse and put it in a forest land area and expect them to eat those tree shrubs. So it's not going to die, but it's not going to be the best option. And this information can help you whenever you are planning to start goat or sheep business. It is very important to vegetation inventory. So this is what we have to think about. But when you see from goats, they can either eat grasses, they can eat weeds, or they can browse. So that's why the best option in sheep, either for grazing management or for weed management as well. So whenever you start your farm, you have to think all those options, or you have to think about the animals you have and the vegetation you have. So when you start a goat business, before you start, if you have a farm, you have to think about the vegetation inventory on your farm, because that's going to dictate what type of livestock you can have on your farm. Okay, so another key consideration you have to think about when you're getting started with sheep and goats is the nutrient requirements of those animals. Sometimes we make a mistake to start and you just think about infrastructure alone. But when you're done with infrastructure, sometimes we will have what to feed those goats and we're going to say, oh, I thought they're going to stay here for 2 months and now I don't have anywhere what to feed, right? And you're going to start sourcing for hay, right? And when that situation happened, does anyone ever face a situation when you have a planning, like, hey, this is going to last them for 5 months and now you are have to buy hay? Anyone ever happened that? Or did you have any problem where you were thinking you have enough pasture and now animals are overgrazing? So probably you have enough space, but sometimes this is also the problem that we face when we are dealing with poor planning. And on the previous slides, there is one key point I also forgot to mention. When you start or you're planning to start with sheep and goats, even if you're to starting a new farm, you have to visit with your county extension office. How many of you have been to the county extension office, your nearest county extension office? Oh, this is good. So how many of you are you familiar with NRCS? Okay, NRCS. Yes. Yes, you did? So are you familiar with EQUIP program? EQUIP? Yes, EQUIP, yes. Okay, so those are like, so whenever you go to the county extension office, that's where you get most of the information of these questions. So they can help you before you start, make you go to the county extension office, they can give you this information. And they also connect with you with different resources, like FSA. So that's where, like whenever you are doing like fencing, they can give you recommendations. And also, I don't know how here in Kentucky works. I have to educate myself, but that's why you can ask like some extension agents. Sometimes when you do like perimeter fence, they help you to bring water and inside the fencing. So I don't know how it's working now, but in Alabama, that was the program that we were helping farmers, especially in the Black Belt region, because most of them, they were not familiar with these opportunities that are out there to help them. So even if you are an existing producer, please make sure that you are reaching out to a county extension office and ask those questions. And another approach that you can use, develop good relationship with research directors at the university institutions. So the reason why I'm saying that, normally when we are applying for grants, sometimes we are required to partner with producers. So let's say I'm planning to start, now that's in my plan to start a project of using goats to control understory vegetation in the forest land area. If either of you has any forest land area and you are interested, I will be happy to partner with you, okay? So, but I'm saying that once you start, make sure that you develop that relationship with research directors because they know what every single professor is working on. Like we have our research director is Dr. Daskuputa. So you can send him email and say, hey, is there any research going on that I can partner with you guys? Because if my research, I'm planning to have any resources like fencing and other things that are permissible to do on your farm, so you are also profiting from that opportunity. So make sure that either at UK or at KSU, you are developing those partnership and relationship with research directors. Yes. Okay, so also we're talking about before you get started with sheep and goats, you have to make sure that you have enough resources, especially what are those animals going to eat? They need forage, right? So with the forage they need, you have to make sure that they have enough nutrient. So you have to make a balance. We have grasses. Grass forages are going to provide energy, right, for those animals. But animals are also like human beings. So they don't only need energy, they have also to have a balanced diet. They have to eat also proteins. So where are those proteins coming from? Legumes. Yes? So it's better to have a pasture which has both grasses and legumes. So I think this is, Dr. Heinz has mentioned about it, but we have different legumes that you can think of. You can have clover, you can have alfalfa. So I know here in Kentucky we have a fescue, Bermuda grass, and you have to think about cool and warm season grasses. So as our weather changes, you have to think about, hey, what is going to be my source of pastures? Or what is going to be source of the feed? Are you going to purchase hay? You have to think about of time. Are you going to have forage all year around? So this is another key consideration as you start. Those are the questions that you should all point out before you start, so that you can have a detailed management plan. So these are examples of current season forages, and so I can share the slides if you have registered and put the email. I can give the slides to Ms. Amanda, who was taking our registration, then I will share the notes. And if you have any questions, I can also chat afterwards. So we have a different forages that we have to think about, and we can also connect to you where if you want to do pasture innovation on your farm. So that's why we are here. Either me or Dr. Carr or Dr. Heinz or UK team, we can come to your farm and say, hey, what type of forages do you have? And we can help you to assess and recommend you the best one that can be suitable on your farm. So another key consideration you have to think about it before you start your livestock system is where you're going to buy your animals. So as you're getting started, these are the questions that you will ask yourself. So I'm going to ask those who are already in the goat business, when did you start and where did you buy your animals? Come again? Privately? From the private? From a breeder? Ah, that's very good. Yes. Okay, so did you check like any, do you know if they were taking any farm records? Record keeping? Kind of. Okay, yes. So how about you, sir?
Yes, we bought our first two goats from the stockyards, bluegrass stockyards.
Uh-huh.
But our third goat, named Billy, is a graduate of Kentucky State. So we got him from here.
Yes.
All the education coming into the breed.
Ah, that's good.
They had an auction here.
Okay. So, any reason behind Billy, or it was just, how did he come up with the name? It's interesting.
Well, we had, I don't know if we have time for this story.
Yeah.
When we were at the stockyards, my wife saw a cute little goat, but I didn't bid on it, I didn't get it. So there was another small goat that came up. So I bid it on that one and I got it, and everybody said, "Oh, that's going to make your wife a nice Mother's Day gift." Later I found out that it was a pygmy. So actually that was Willie. And
Yes.
so we tried to get rid of Willie. So when we were here for one of the workshops, they were selling some of the goats here, and that's when we got Billy.
Ah.
So we got rid of Willie and infused Billy. But unfortunately, Willie has some strong genes, and whenever you see a goat with gray eye that looks like a minus sign in their eyes, that is Willie still hanging on with his gene pool.
Yes. Maybe next time we're gonna get Terry. We start with Billy, Willie, Terry. Yes. Okay, that's good. So, anyways, so this is here I was in those pictures were taken in Auburn, Kentucky. So I was extension specialist in Alabama. But one of the challenge you have to think about, normally if you are not in the goat business, you don't have any disease on your farm. If you don't have any animals, or animals your farm hasn't, you didn't have any animals before. So you have to make sure that what you bring on your farm doesn't have any diseases. So how that's going to happen? Where do you source your animals? That's where the biosecurity is going to start. It may cost you a lot to buy a registered animal, but it's going to pay on the long run, right? And even if you cannot go to the registered animal, try to find a well-trusted producer. How are you going to find well-trusted producers? So me, I will not buy your animals without looking on record keeping. So why am I buying it? I'm buying it the way it looks. I have to go to your farm and I ask you, show me records for the past 3 years. Who was the mother of this animal that I'm buying? Who was the father of the animals I'm buying? What has been the winning weight? What was the Famacha score or the parasite? If you are checking the eyes, show me how many times. So show me if their mothers has not missed any breeding cycle, how long does it take for them to go in heat? So are you looking for animals which are going to give you twins or singles? So those are the questions that you have to ask there, right? So I hope you ask those ones. I think it's okay, sorry. It's okay. So I think that's going to be the next topic that they're going to talk about. Okay, yes. So, okay, even if you are new. So, but I think that's going to be the next topic. They're going to be talking about the parasite management, and they're going to talk also about the Famacha scoring, I know. And I think it's going to be part of your practice when you go outside. But if you are planning to buy any other animals from now on, that's the key. You have to go and ask those questions, especially for record keeping. And when you get your animals next time, so if you are already have animals and you are planning to buy other ones, these are the key you have to think about as you are getting started with sheep and goats. Assess the history of disease of producer's farm. Yes? So how are you going to know that? Through asking records keeping, right? And current disease status. They might not have a disease right now, but you have to ask from their history to know that is going to be from the record keeping. And say now you brought your animals on the farm. What are you going to do? Are you going to let them roam all around your farm? Hopefully not, right? So normally we do quarantining. So you have to think of that space that as you start where your animals, you're going to keep them, so you quarantine them. So say that now you have a biddy at the farm, and you bring Riri next time on the farm. We have to make sure that Riri is quarantined at least for 2 weeks to see if there is no sign of diseases. So that will make us that we are not introducing any disease to our existing animals. So we have also to do physical examinations. So if you are not buying farm far away, that's where you can even go with your county extension agent. So they can be able to help. Hey, I'm buying some animals to a producer nearby here, so could you come and help me to check out these animals? So I think if it's in the area district, I used to help farmers doing that when I was in Alabama. So, but I have hope here as well, our extension agent, I have no doubt that they will be willing to help or give you those guidance. And you have also to ask, have you been doing vaccination? If they have been doing the vaccination, it's good. Are you going to do vaccination? That's another area that you have to think about. So all those are the first questions that you have to ask as you start a goat or sheep business, or when we are getting started. And this information is not only for someone who is starting. Even if you are existing producer, as you are saying, you are still under process, these are the steps that you have to take as form of biosecurity. And also, as you start, certain mistake we make is to invite everybody who's coming here, like family members. Hey, come, I'm going to show you my animals. Do you know what we are bringing? If they have also animals, they're going to bring disease from their farm, right? So that's why we have to take biosecurity measures under consideration as we do this. So this is what I was talking about. When you talked about the FAMACHA scoring, you can see the eyelid. So this is what we do with the FAMACHA. And this was during the COVID when we purchased goats from Kentucky, brought them to Alabama. It was during the COVID. The first step we do, we walk them, we put them in a chute, we deworm them. We never know if they had parasites or not. We checked, but we have to double check again. And we check their FAMACHA scoring. Then they go through quarantine for 2 weeks. We have 2 pastures which were designed for quarantining. So if you have any animals on your farm or bring animals on your farm, you are getting started. All those considerations are key measures that we have to think about as we start. Yes. So another challenge that we face that you have to think about as you start goat business or sheep business, again, it depends on where you live. If you live nearby forest, you're going to have to deal with coyotes, right? So with the coyotes, you have to think about how to keep them inside, animals inside, and how to keep coyotes outside, right? So from my personal experience and in goats, so we have 2 ways. Sometimes use temporary fencing, like electric netting, but normally those, they will work when it's not like when you are in an open area. But when you are in a forest around the area, sometimes you can have like wind or branches, they're going to come and knock it down. And the following day, what is going to happen when you come? You're going to have visitors, unwanted visitors, those coyotes. There's one day we used like those electric netting, and we lost about 7 sheep in one night. So, as you start your goat business or sheep business, these are the questions you have to think about. How am I going to keep them inside? And how am I going to keep predators outside? So, you will have a talk in the afternoon. I talked to one of our technicians. He will show you certain type of fencing we have here. And this is one for perimeter fence. I always recommend people to use permanent fence, because even if the weather is very bad, especially if you live nearby coyotes, and any branch fall down on those, they're gonna come in. But this is a permanent fence for outside. It's not gonna, so they cannot come inside. It's just for precaution. But everything also has to go with money, right? So those are expensive, I know, but so that's what you have to think about. How many animals do I have, and how am I going to make a return on investment? But for the inside the fencing, this is what we're using. Was also in Alabama. So we're using interior fencing, we're using electric netting. So interior fencing can help you to separate large pastures into small pastures. So, and you know the reason why we are separating those pastures, we have to have a grazing management plan as you are working on your farm. Because when you have doing rotational grazing, it's going to help you to manage your pastures and to deal with the parasites. I don't want to go into the next topic, but that's the information they're going to also telling you about how forage management is going to be a remedy for parasite management as well. So, in conclusion, as well, design integrated parasite management plan. So, I'm glad this is going to be the next topic, but mostly I wanted to touch the 3 Ps. Parasite, predators, and perimeter, okay? So, the last one, as you said, you told me the most problem we're facing was the coccidia, right? Or parasites, right? So, you have to have integrated parasite management plan. So, everything is going to start to how your pasture looks like. So, what are your animals eating? Pasture management, you have to maintain forage height, rotational grazing, and resting period. Anyone doing those? Are you doing it? Oh, that's good. So you have 2 sections? Mm-hmm. Okay. So you are rotating them in 2 paddocks? How many days? How do you decide? Like, every 3 days? Okay. So it's also gonna depend on like the forage height and the availability as well. So if you don't have more pastures, you have to move them many times, right? So, but I think for the next topic, they will tell you how many days you have to go, like to wait with the cycle period of barber worm, how many days the eggs stay on the ground before they become able to move on the. So I think it's going to be part of the next topic. Yes. So you have also to think about animal selection. So culling, avoiding using sick bucks and ram for breeding. So if you are planning to have your animals bred, so you have to think about where you're going to find the breeding stock or the ram or the buck, because if they are sick, they can transfer those sickness to your animals. And the buck is very important because, you know, it's determine 50% of the genetics in your herd, even one single buck. You can have one dam sick, but if you have a buck sick, it's going to transfer to the whole entire population in your herd. So you have also to think about adequate nutrition. So anyone feeding supplement here? Do you, or your animals are only on grass? Do you feed any corn or soybean meal? Okay, minerals, yes, mineral supplementation. So, but sometimes we have also to feed high concentrated diet, especially when those animals, they are sick, the parasites are sucking blood from them. So when the parasites are sucking blood, those animals are losing energy. So me, I used to give them corn. It was game changer. Beside doing like deworming, you have to make sure that those animals are getting enough energy. So you can give them like 1 pound of corn per day, cracked corn. So, and I used to mix with the minerals so that they can eat it. And it's best for those animals to use loose minerals, especially for sheep and goats, because their teeth, they are not like cattle. You know, they're gonna be using their teeth to eat. So it's best to use like loose mineral rather than using block minerals. So, and also as you get things started, whenever you are doing your planning, you have also to incorporate good management practices, how to use dewormers, when to deworm, and how to deworm, and when to deworm. And the decision tool that they're going to talk about today is going to be about the Famacha scoring, because that's one decision tool that we use, and they're going to tell you other signs that you can base on when you are deworming. So pretty much that's the information I did have today. As take-home message is that starting sheep or goat business is possible, but you have also to think about those considerations. I did not go into economics, but I wanted you to open your mind or think about all those key criteria or what is going to be very important as you start. And you have to think about to do vegetation inventory. When you know the vegetation on your farm, is going to tell you, hey, is the livestock species that I want to raise going to be appropriate on my farm? And after that, you have to think about what is going to be the source of the feed. Am I going to purchase more hay? Am I going to plant cool and warm season forage so I can have forage all year around? Yes, that it is checked. Now, okay, I have what I'm going to feed my animals. Where do I find my animals? Find trusted producers. Talk to county extension office. They can connect you to the good producer. Now you find a producer. Make sure that you are doing, those producers have farm records. So those records will tell you where to start if those animals had any problem. Have your biosecurity measures planned. When the animals comes in, don't introduce them to your whole pasture. You don't want to get infected. With that, you have to have at least quarantine area that your animals are going to stay so that they don't infect the whole pasture. And last not least, make sure that you are connected with those county extension agents, because they're going to connect with the different available resources, either FSA, NRCS, and here at Kentucky as well. So we are here to support whenever you have any questions. So we'll be happy to assist with you. And I don't have my cards yet, I'm still in you. But yeah, that's my email. My name is Dr. Valens. You can take my email, shoot me email anytime. Hey, Dr. V, I have a problem. Would you come to my farm and check out? So I don't have to come when you have problems. I can even come and see what you are doing. We are also learning. We can learn from you. You can learn from us. We can also learn from you. And with that, I thank you so much. If you have any question, I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. V. That was certainly some excellent information. And thank you again. Next, we have our next presenter is Dr. Lay. Dr. Lay is with the University of Kentucky, but Dr. Lay is no stranger here at Kentucky State University. Dr. Lay has been a thoroughbred. So at this time, we're going to give our undivided attention to Dr. Jesse Lay.
Do I need the mic? Yeah. All right, I'll use it. If I start yelling at you, it ain't my fault. All right. Where's the clicker? All right. So to start, yes, I second everything he said. So my background, I practice, I'm a vet, not a PhD. specialist in nothing, jack of all trades. And then I joined Kentucky State. I was here for about 7 years, and I just switched to the University of Kentucky. Right. I love Kentucky State University, and I miss it terribly. But Dr. Valens, Dr. Carr, it makes me feel good to know I left it in good hands. So thank you very much for that talk. He did half my job for me, y'all. All right. So I like to keep things really basic. Like I said, I'm not the specialist, right? I'm going to keep things really basic. Stop me if you have more questions. When we get to Coccidia, we'll answer some of the things you were just asking. But feel free to interrupt me at any time. So when we start talking about animal health, yes, we don't want any animals to suffer. That's true, right? But also, right, they're not going to be productive if they're not healthy, right? You've got, when an animal dies, there's an obvious loss. When it's not growing, you got problems. Vets are expensive. Ask me about my student loans, right? And then it even affects fertility, which Dr. Carr will talk about later. Everything depends on their health. So how do we keep them healthy, right? Hoping, wishing, praying, right? What are we going to do, right? Number one is the nutrition, right? I am not a nutritionist. Like I said, not a PhD. Dr. Valens is, right? But I'm going to let you in on a little secret, right? It is almost impossible for an animal to starve to death. It doesn't happen. Long before they starve to death, malnutrition is going to make them so weak they die from something else, right? So when we talk about keeping them healthy, proper nutrition is the number one thing you can do, right? And that's not just, are they getting enough protein? Are they getting enough energy, right? Our minerals too. They can be fat and sassy and look great, but not be getting enough minerals, right? So everything I say is going to be based on a healthy animal, right? Nutrition is the number one most important thing we can do for these guys, right? Decreasing stress. Y'all know it. Anytime we get stressed, we're going to catch a cold, strep, whatever, right? Maintenance on your animals, right? If you've got a car, you've got to change the oil. If you've got a goat, you're going to have to trim its hooves, right? This is just taking care of them, doing all the preventatives, and monitoring for early signs of illnesses. These aren't little cows. A cow gets sick, she will go off, stand by herself, look terrible, right? In sheep and goats, their flock instinct is so much stronger. By the time they've left the other animals, right, it's almost too late, right? They don't show symptoms like other species do, right? So we get all into thinking about the disease, causative agent. We're talking about the parasites are the problem, or we're talking about the virus. But we got to remember, there's two sides to this, right? Yes? Yeah, so monitoring for early signs of Fibonacci and the body condition scoring, I've got a whole slide on that, or 2 or 3 slides, so we're going to get there, right? All right. So when we start talking about an animal catching a disease, right, we've got the animal, the host factors, and then we've got the factors of the disease, right? You know, COVID-19 was in the same class as the common cold, but it wasn't the same thing. So some are going to be more aggressive than others, right? If you don't have it on your farm, your animals aren't going to catch it. Biosecurity, where are you buying them from? Don't bring in problems. But we also got to remember the host. I talked about nutrition, the immune system, right? But we can also do vaccines, right? And different things to keep them healthy. So let's roll through some of this. Number one, minerals. I mentioned this earlier. And I love that Dr. Valens said loose mineral. And I say this over and over and over again, right? Cows, anybody ever been licked by a cow? They got this big sandpaper tongue that feels like it takes half your face off, right? These guys don't have that. And it drives me nuts when I go into Tractor Supply and they got a sheep and goat block sitting there. They can't eat off a block. They don't have that big tongue. Their tongues are really soft, right? They can't consume it. And Lord have mercy. If you see a bag of sheep and goat mineral, what do you do with it? Throw it away, right? Each species has their own requirements, right? Sheep can't have copper. Goats have to have it. So if you can feed this bag to both of them, it's not good for either one of them. Y'all with me? Right? Right. So I love this picture. That's my favorite mineral feeder up there, right? $30 at Lowe's, just getting PVC pipe and putting it together, right? It's loose mineral, so it's self-feeding from the top. They stick their nose in. They can't poop or pee in it, right? So we don't have to have fancy equipment, but making sure it's kept somewhere dry, right? And always loose mineral. All right, so selenium. Kentucky, we are super, super deficient in selenium. Other areas of the country aren't. But we are so much so that they can't legally add enough to the feed to compensate for our deficiencies, right? So there's a product called Bose, which is a selenium supplement. I give all lambs and kids half a cc at birth because minerals don't come through the uterus very well. When it's in the uterus, mama doesn't share a whole lot of minerals with it. So it's really super important before you have the full-blown deficiency. A lot of times in these lambs and kids, the first symptom you'll see of your selenium being off is just they can't suck. They don't have a really good suckle. Sometimes you go to bottle feed them and it's like their tongue's just flopping all over the place. Half a cc of Bose. BO-SE, right? But the muscles need selenium to function, and the tongue is a muscle. So not having that suckle reflex is one of the first symptoms that you're going to have. So it's super important to, like I said, give your babies, right, a supplement, and then keep good quality mineral provided. Right? So copper, right? So sheep and goats differ here. Like I said, through my presentation, sometimes I'm going to be talking about bucks and does, and then I'm going to switch to rams. I tell you when things are different. And this is one where sheep and goats are not the same. And haired sheep and wool sheep are not the same. Goats have to have copper, right? Their level, their requirements are up closer to a cow, right? Sheep and goats, especially wool sheep, you've got to be really careful because copper can be toxic to them. Right? Haired sheep need a little bit more copper than wool sheep, but still not as much as a goat. So having minerals, having feeds that are balanced by a nutritionist, right, is going to be the way that you achieve that. Right. So nutritional requirements. I said, I'm not a nutritionist, so I got to make things simple. Right? So there's this nice little formula here. When you ask me, what are the requirements? Maintenance, right? So maintenance is the nutrients we need for our heart to keep beating, our brain to function, right? Think about it as just laying on the couch, vegging out, how many calories, right? That's just kind of the general where you start from, all right? An adult goat, in the summertime, right? If she's not bred, if she's not growing, grass is fine. That's enough for her to, be vegging out on the couch. That hits maintenance. But the difference is when we start adding stuff to it. Now, if they're young and they're growing, they're physically getting bigger, right? If they're physically getting bigger, right, they're going to need more nutrients. That makes sense, doesn't it? If she's pregnant, right? Sometimes she's eating for 2, sometimes she's eating for 5, right? That's going to add on what they need, right? And then we subtract losses, right? So losses could be from parasites or from shivering, right? In the wintertime when you're cold and you're sitting there shivering, what's happening? Your muscles are contracting and releasing, contracting and releasing. That's why we shiver. For them, that's like going to the gym because they're using those muscles. So that's going to take more energy, isn't it? So here's the question. am I going to feed an adult goat and a young baby the same? No, because they got different requirements, right? So you're going to have to group them in different pens, right? That makes sense. Right? Management factors. So like I said, Dr. Valens, he has got a PhD in nutrition. He can design a feed for you. From where I come from, I'm usually dealing with what happens when you don't feed them right. And some on practical things in sheep and goats, they're very finicky. You see all these like kids' books with goats eating tin cans. No, their feed gets wet, they ain't gonna eat it. Their hay's too stemmy. They are really super picky, right? And they do. They will climb in their trough and they will poop in it and then refuse to eat it. They do it on purpose. They do. I swear. Right? Particle size, I like feeding them pellets because those nose, kind of like a little rabbit, will sift through and eat the parts they like and not the parts they don't, right? Just like a 4-year-old, right? For rumen health, feeding them multiple times a day is recommended. Inadequate bunk space. This is probably the biggest problem I see with producers, right? So an adult goat, let's think about this. She's got horns that stick out, right? An adult goat needs 18 inches, 1.5 feet of bunk space to herself. That's more than a cow. You throw feed in a trough, cows are in there like sharks, just jumping on top of each other. But when you factor in that those horns are sticking out to the side, she's got to have a whole lot more room. And what happens? All right, look at this picture here. You guys see it? Right? You go out to this farm, and about 80% of the animals are going to look great. And then they've got 20% that look terrible. And what's happening, the ones that need it the most are the ones that aren't getting it. And two, all right, goat people, I'm sorry, but when we start talking about like all our species of livestock, goats are the Paris Hilton, right? They are drama queens. Their social hierarchy is super, super strong, right? That goat, she is not going to go fight the bully. A cow will, but not in goats, right? They will stand there and not eat anything before they go try to fight the boss. They do. Super person. I've got one client and I love her. I'm going to tell a story on her, Kathy. I went out to her farm and she had like 10 different pens of dairy goats. And there's like 3 goats in each pen. I was like, okay. And then at some point I said, why, all these different, and she's like, oh girl. Right? She's like, now Coco does not get along with Betty. And like they all had histories. And it was, but it's true, right? They will not fight the boss. So watch that, right? And it can be, if you get one that's super timid, that can be a reason to cull them, right? Just because their social hierarchy is so strong. Hay feeders, Dr. Valens talked about, especially goats being browsers, how they like to eat up high, right? So getting feeders, get that hay up off the ground. Square bales are always preferred, right? We talked about their mouth being different than a cow, right? When a round bale is real tight, I've seen some round bales so tight that even with my fingers, I can't pull the straw off, right? Because cows can bite into that, goats and sheep can't. Right? So square bales are always preferred because they're looser and easier to consume. Right? And now somebody in this room is going to look at me and say, I got 300 sheep, Doc, I ain't doing that. I get it. All right, we got to be practical about it too. But for small herds, square bales are preferred. All right. So, I talked about they don't show signs. A lot of times you can look at them, they just don't look right. But they don't show symptoms like other animals do, right? And so when you start thinking about it, you see an animal and it just doesn't look right. ADR, ain't doing right, right? That's medical term right there, right? All right, so then we start going down the list. What could be wrong with them, right? Well, right, so we look at the age. Some things are going to be more common in young animals than older animals, right? Some things are going to be more common in females versus males, right? You're not going to see a whole lot of bucks that got diseases of the uterus. That makes sense, right? Temperature. So temperature is one of the most important things that people forget about, right? Parasites don't cause a fever. Metabolic diseases don't cause a fever. Bacteria and viruses do, though, right? So when you take you call me and you're like, Doc, this is what it's doing, and you're telling me everything that's wrong with it. First thing I'm going to ask you is what's its temperature, right? Because that rules in some things and rules out other things. So before you call your vet, always make sure that you've got a temperature on the animal to see if it's got a fever. All right, so I'm going to kind of roll through this in categories because, like I said, age does play a factor. So in our young animals, our newborns, right, getting things started off right, colostrum. Colostrum is going to be the only immune system they have for the first 2 months of life, right? When they're born, they've got no antibodies. They've been exposed to nothing. They have no immune system. And we used to tell you, I used to stand up here, I have, and said they got to get colostrum within the first 24 hours. No, right? They went back, they've done more research. They've got to have it in the first 8 hours. Even better, the first 6. After that, they're only absorbing probably 10% by 24 hours. So as they've went back and they've done the research, what they found is we used to say 24 hours, and that still wasn't good enough, right? So if you're only checking your animals once a day during lambing season, right, you're going to miss that window in a whole lot of them, right? So cows are easy, y'all. Like, their cows are tough, right? They can be born at 30 degrees. They're born with a leather jacket, right? These guys are a whole lot more sensitive to cold, right? So putting them in lambing jugs, checking multiple times a day, right, is going to be super important to getting these things off on the right start. Creep feeding, so for those of you who don't know, creep feeding is you make a pen where the babies can get in and the mothers can't, right? It usually comes with a gate with small holes, right, where the babies can go in and learn to eat, right? Because if you throw food in that trough, there's no way they can get up and compete with mama. And if you wean them and they don't know what food is, you're going to be in a big mess. All right. So diarrhea, scours. Lots of causes, right? So E. coli, this is the one that I see the most. Under 2 weeks old, this is almost always the cause, right? I throw this slide up here, and I'm going to get into more details in a minute, right? But with parasites, homunculus, worms, right? It's fecal oral transmitted, right? They get it, they're pooping on their dinner plate, right? So they poop, and then the next animal coming by grazing picks it up, right? How much grazing is a week-old lamb doing? Nada, right? E. coli, though, E. coli works super, super fast, right? Gas station sushi, right? Tomorrow you're going to pay for it, right? It acts that fast. So if you're seeing diarrhea, especially in that first 2 weeks of life, the only thing that's going to act that fast, right, is going to be E. coli, right? Coccidia. Coccidia, a lot of times they are exposed at birth, but they don't start showing symptoms till they're about a month old. It takes a while for the parasites to set up in their system. So age is super important. If you got diarrhea in a young baby, it's almost always E. coli, right? Those, especially bottle babies that are doing great and then tank at a month old, coccidia is usually your culprit. But we really don't have to worry about worms until they start grazing at about 3 months old. So internal parasites, these are signs that we see in almost all species. If you've got a parasite in there stealing nutrients, they start getting thin, right? They get diarrhea from the digestive upset. They're weak. Eventually, they will die. Sheep and goats, something different than other species, right, is the anemia. Right? That's something we don't have to worry about with some of the other species of livestock. And that's because of something called homuncus, the barber pole worm. So you see the adult worm up there at the top of the screen, and you see that red and white spiral. Right? What that is this worm lives in the stomach. It attaches to the lining, burrows into the lining of the stomach, and it sucks blood. So when you're seeing that barber pole, that red swirl, that's the blood that the worm's been drinking, that it's digesting. Right? One or two worms isn't a big deal, but you start getting thousands of them, the animal's, for all practical purposes, bleeding to death internally, right? And you can't see it. Like I said, it's fecal oral transmitted. The adult's living in the stomach, sucking blood. She lays eggs. Those eggs pass out through the feces. When the eggs hit the grass, they hatch into what we call larvae, microworms, right, little tiny worms. The next animal coming by consumes them. Once they get in its stomach, the life cycle starts over again. That picture at the bottom, isn't that pretty? I don't even know how they got that picture. But that's one drop of dew. That's one water droplet. And all those little swigglies are larvae, those microworms. So the next coat coming by can consume that one drop of water, and that's how many worms it can get from one water droplet. Right? When your pastures get super saturated, that's why we talk about rotational grazing, is we don't want a pasture to get to the point that it looks like that. So anemia. So let's say I'm out there doing something stupid, and I don't know, I had to about cut my leg off, and there's blood squirting everywhere. What happens? Right? Like, my skin gets pale, right? My lips turn blue, like I just lose all color. Brown goat, right? Can you tell if it's pale? It's got hair, its skin's thicker. You can't just look at it and tell, right? But there's one spot that's not going to lie to you. That's your eyelids. Everybody pull your eyelid down, look at your neighbor, right? Everybody pink. We got anybody bleeding to death in here? Right. Y'all are quiet this morning. Right. So Famantia, this is, what we mentioned in the first slide. This is only for the barber pole worm, right? It doesn't work on any other types of parasites, but it's a system. There's a little card, right, copyrighted by LSU, right, that you can actually score them. You hold this card right up to their eyelid, and you can gauge their level of homuncus. I said only homuncus, right? But it's quick and it's easy. So goats, you can go out in the field and grab them by their handlebars and look, right? And just that instantly, right? It doesn't tell you exactly, but it can give you an estimate of how much their parasite burden is, right? So now coccidia. This question came up just a few minutes ago too. I didn't hear everything from over there, but coccidia is also a big problem in our small ruminants. Right? So it is a protozoa, right? Single-celled organism, tiny little thing, right? And so it works different. The picture up at the top of that screen, right? That's the intestines, right? Basic digestion, right? The stomach breaks down food, but then the intestines have to absorb it, right? So top of the screen, that's after a necropsy, where intestines, like I said, they're a big long tube, has been cut in half. See all those little dots? Those are all like cysts, where coccidia has invaded, and it makes a cyst in the lining, right? See how angry that is? So these guys can be sitting there and eating, but that intestine's not going to absorb anything, right? So it causes a malabsorptive syndrome, where they'll be sitting there and they're eating, right? But they're not absorbing anything. They're consuming, right? And okay, so I just said it's a protozoa, right? Is a dewormer going to kill it? It's not a worm, right? And that's a call I get over and over again. Doc, I've dewormed this thing 3 times. Well, did you check for coccidia? Right? Coccidia is not a worm, so a dewormer's not going to touch it. Right? So we can't forget about it because we've got to treat it differently. Right? Keep losing my clicker. Sorry. All right. So what are the symptoms of coccidia? Those, right, are all the same ones I said for their homuncus and parasites. Losing weight, rough hair coat. But what you don't see is the anemia. So when you go out and you pick out a goat and you look at its eyelid, it can be loaded with coccidia and still be pink as it can be, right? This does not affect Fumantia. Right, but luckily with coccidia, right, it's a problem in young animals, show animals, and high-producing dairy goats, right? In adult sheep and goats, I usually don't see a problem unless there's something underlying like a nutritional issue, right? So they first get exposed when they're young. Once they've been exposed to coccidia a few times, right, their immune system eventually learns how to deal with it. But in these young babies, it can be super, super dangerous. Show animals, right, you can have beautiful, beautiful wethers, right, and you're taking them to all the shows and they look wonderful. Well, when you're putting it on a truck, taking it out in the heat, taking it all over the country to this county fair and that county fair, you don't think you're stressing it a little bit? Right? So show animals, like I said, they can look beautiful, but break with this just from the stress. Right? Adult dairy goats, right? Lactation. Lactation is a huge energy demand, right? So these adult dairy goats, right, they give birth, which I don't have any kids, but I've heard it's stressful, right? And then we immediately ask them to just start dumping out, right, all these nutrients through their milk, right? That's metabolic stress. That's stress on the body, right? So that's why we will see it in adult dairy goats, but not so much adult sheep or the meat goats, because their body's not under as much pressure from lactation. So all of these parasites, right, coccidia, its life cycle, right, those protozoa lay their version of an egg, which is called an oocyte, but basically an egg, right, comes out through the feces, hits the ground, and then the next animal will get it if they consume it. Right. Lungworms. Lungworms, the adults are in the lungs, but they produce all that fluid, and when they hawk up a loogie, they swallow it, eggs are still coming out through the feces. So all of these parasites are fecal oral transmission. Right? So what's my point? Yeah, it's an awesome movie, right? Right. Right? So practically, right? Don't eat poop. You know, when we talk about overcrowding animals, you got more animals pooping and less grass in one spot, right? Most of the parasite eggs are going to be on that bottom 3 inches of grass. Dr. Valens talked about that's goats like eating high, right? They like eating the tops. They know that the ground is dirty, right? Sheep are more of grazers, right? But anything we can do, you want to keep your grass over 3 inches tall, right? We don't want them eating on that close to the ground because of the parasites. Rotational grazing, right? Implementing it, right? You've got to let a field sit at least 30 days, right? So you move them to another field. Right? Co-grazing, right? So cattle and sheep both get parasites, but not the same parasites, right? There's something called the species barrier. Sheep get sheep parasites, cows get cows parasites. So what the big research is now is they run the sheep and then let the cows follow them, and they don't get the same parasites. So you are letting it rest, but still using that ground. So that's something up and coming research there. All right. So decreasing animal susceptibility. Like I said, I've harped enough on nutrition, but it is important. Decreasing stress, right? Those minerals, those trace minerals are super important for the immune system. And then we're going to monitor animals, right? So Fumantia, like I said, it's quick, it's easy to do, right? It's recommended to do it once a month, right? Somebody in here has got 300 sheep looking at me and saying, yeah, right, Doc. I get it. It's not practical, right? But let's say I am looking at the Famantia, right? And on the Famantia, you're going to treat the 4s and 5s, right? Because those obviously have a lot of worms. Well, what about those 3s that are kind of in the middle? Right? Well, it depends. So if they're kind of borderline this time of year, and I'm getting ready to throw the buck in, what do? Right? I'm going to go ahead and treat her, because a lot of these dewormers you can't give to pregnant animals. So if I don't give it right now, I can't give it for another 5 months, right? So we're always going to check them pre-breeding for that one purpose of is if I don't take care of the worms now, most of my drugs I can't use till after she has the babies. That makes sense, right? Well, we talked about the stress of labor, right? And during labor, you're losing blood in another way, right? So that's another time. If they're losing blood through the birth process, right, and they were borderline on their parasite level, I'm going to go ahead and treat them then too, because I know they just got stressed and they lost blood for another reason, right? All right, here's another scenario. What if they're borderline and I'm getting ready to wean the babies? Then what? I'm not going to treat her because she's getting ready to get rid of the other parasites. I'm sorry. Babies are not parasites. They're beautiful little angels, right? But I'm getting ready to take pressure off of her metabolism, right? So when I'm getting ready to wean the babies, I'm going to look at those eyelids, right? And if she's borderline, I'm just going to make a note to recheck her in a month. Let her body, right, kind of balance out and see if she can bounce back by herself. All right. So if you can't check them monthly, you do want to check Famantia pre-breeding, at the time of lambing, and at the time of weaning, right? So those are always check them. Right. There are fecal testing methods, and if you guys are interested in learning to do your own fecals, we can get with Dr. Carr, Sarah, and we can set up a training for that. Fecal flotations, that's what you do. So a fecal flotation is diagnostic. You know, I talked about coccidia, right? Lungworms, homunculus are all fecal oral, right? So if I take this feces and I look at what eggs are in it, I know what adults are living upstream, right? So that's what a fecal does. So if an animal's got diarrhea and I'm like, okay, is it homunculus or is it coccidia, right? That's the easiest way to tell, right? I can see what eggs are coming out and know what problems are up in the stomach or intestines, right? You can do fecal egg counts. Right? Anybody heard of the 80-20 rule? Not the one on dating, the other one, right? All right. Let's say I walk up to you and I say, I'm going to get rid of 80% of the parasites on your farm overnight. What would you say? Okay. And then I'm going to say, pull the truck around. Okay. So the 80-20 rule, 20% of your animals are going to hold 80% of your parasites. It's not even. You can. At weaning, you can do fecal egg counts. And what you'll see is like 400, 500, 1,200, 300, 400, 1,000. Right? So long before they're ever having symptoms, you can do fecal egg counts to see exactly how many eggs are coming out. You can find that 20 and put them on a truck. Right? They're going to be your little girl's favorite every time, right? But, right, there is a genetic component to this. If you keep that 20%, because they're your baby, their daughters are also going to be more susceptible to parasites, right? And so genetically, we need to make these animals tougher, right? The sheep industry especially right now, it's booming. Everybody, right, they're trying to grow their numbers, and we are breeding a lot of animals that shouldn't be bred. Right? But like I said, if we can find genetically that 20% and get rid of them, that's the best way to start cleaning our herd out. Like I said, but like I said, I know I got my favorites too, but it does keep eggs on your pasture. Yes, ma'am. Some vet clinics do them, some don't. If we want to get with Dr. Carr, we can do a clinic on how to do your own fecals and what you need, supplies. And then the other way we can use fecal egg count reductions, or fecal egg counts, is to do a reduction test. All right? All right, who am I going to pick on now? You're here in front of me. You're here in front of me. All right. So let's say I do a fecal egg count, and it's got 1,000 eggs per gram. Okay? Then I give it a dewormer. I give the dewormer about a week to do its thing, and I come back and I do another fecal egg count. And now it's only got 500 eggs per gram. Are you happy? No, you just paid for a dewormer that only half worked, and they're expensive. Right? For me to say that a drug is working, it should kill at least 90% of the parasites. Right? Because if it doesn't, right? What's the old saying? What doesn't kill us makes us stronger. Same thing's true with those parasites, right? If a dewormer kills 90% of the parasites, the 10% that are left saw that drug and are ready for it next time. That's how resistance develops, is that 10% that didn't get killed, or 50%, whichever it may be, they've seen the drug, right? And those are the ones that are going to multiply, right? That's, in an essence, that's how resistance develops. Yes. So that's a tricky question. So, like I said, when we're doing their fecal egg counts, that's not looking at their FAMACHA score. They can look perfectly healthy and have really high fecal egg counts. And what that's called is resilience, right? So we got two different things. We got resistance and we got resilience, right? Resistance means they can be exposed to something and not get it, right? And that's genetic, right? So that's, the 80-20 rule. That is genetic resistance. So what she's talking about is resilience, right? So when you hear the word resilience, what do you think, right? I think about like a boxer and how many hits he can take and still be on his feet, right? Right? It's how tough you are, right? So resilience, there are some of these animals, and they're the ones that are going to trick you, right? Because they're going to have really high counts, right? They're not resistant. They're getting the worms. They're just tough and dealing with it, right? And with those animals, that's a great quality to have. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to worry about it if they're resistant or not. If they can have the worms and handle it, good. But the immune system, with those animals, what will happen is they're handling it just fine. And then something will stress them, like giving birth, and they tank overnight, right? Because the worms have been there. They just aren't as tough today as they were yesterday. And also, if they're resilient, the eggs are still coming out through the feces. And they're tough enough to handle it, but they keep putting eggs on that pasture, and their buddy might not be so tough. So some people are going to tell you, yes, right? I want to be able to handle the worms. I'm going to breed for toughness, right? I throw caution in there that they're keeping your pasture contaminated. Kind of a long-winded answer there. Right. So wormx.com, or .info, this is a great website. They have charts with every dewormer for sheep and goats and how much to give. There's one for sheep and one for goats. It's not the same, all right? They have all kinds of fact sheets and great information. So wormx.info, right? If you haven't been on that website, get on there and check. Lots of resources. All right. Smart drenching. I talked about being resistant to the dewormer, right? 50 years ago, we didn't know a whole lot about sheep and goats. Like, we just hadn't done the research yet. We knew they got parasites, So we're like, all right, we're going to deworm them every 3 months, right? That should fix it. Stupid idea, right? It was vets. We'll own it, right? We didn't know better. Because when we were deworming them every 3 months, we were exposing them to the same thing over and over again. Like, I was that kid. Anybody had that kid with ear infections? When I was little, I had an ear infection like every other month, right? And they take me to the doctor. I couldn't wait till I got another one because I got that pink stuff, tastes like bubble gum. Y'all know it? Yeah. I could just drink that stuff. And one day on a weekend, they didn't have walk-in clinics back then, right? Not telling you how old I am, right? Got an ear infection on the weekend. Bubble gum stuff didn't work, right? My eardrum actually burst, right? Because the infection got so bad. Because I had taken that pink stuff over and over again until the ear infection was laughing at it, right? So the same thing happened with dewormers. So now we're backing up and we're saying only treat animals when they need it. With one exception. Weaning is the most stressful event in their life, and their immune system is still developing, right? So everything's going to get dewormed at weaning. That's my one exception, right? But otherwise, if they don't need dewormed, I'm not going to expose them to that drug until they do. Right? 80-20 rule. Got ahead of myself. All right. So, the next thing we did is we were like, okay, we don't want to get them resistant to something. So we started rotating dewormers. We're like, we're still going to deworm them every 3 months, but we're just use different stuff. We just made them resistant to everything, right? So rotation of dewormers, not a good idea, right? Using the proper technique. You guys see that little metal thing on the end of this syringe? Like I said, goats, full of personality, but they can spit about anything out. There is no way with a plain syringe they're going to get the whole dose. They're just not, right? Make sure you screw that tip on, but using that tip on the end of your syringe is going to get it to the back of the mouth where they can't spit it out. On sheep and goats, you've got to get it all the way to the back of the mouth. All right. So like I said, there are some other causes of diarrhea. These aren't as common, right? They can have a little bit of dietary indiscretion, just like any of us can. Yonis, of course, E. coli and neonates. So there can be other causes of diarrhea as well that, we've got to be on the lookout for. All right, so let me switch gears a little bit. Still talking about young animals. Right? Clostridium perfringens. Right, so this is a bacteria that causes diarrhea, neurologic symptoms. In sheep and goats, in babies, what I usually see is they were fine yesterday, and today they're just a dish rag. Right? Have you seen those that they were up, they were doing great, and now they're just limp and laying there. Right? Luckily, there is a vaccine. Right? Tetanus is a Clostridium as well. Right? So tetanus, Clostridiums, when I talk about that, they are an anaerobic bacteria. Right? Big fancy word that means anti-air. Right? Tetanus likes to grow in wounds that air's not getting to. Right? Puncture wounds. You step on a nail. Right? In animals, what do we create when we band them? A wound that air's not getting to. Never, ever, 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 ever band an animal that hadn't had a tetanus shot. Right? That is the number one time that I see tetanus. Right? When you start talking about vaccines, right? In other species, you've got like 3 or 4 different ones they have to have. Sheep and goats, we got it made, right? Our vaccine recommendations are pretty easy, right? In these young guys, like I said, their immune system's still developing, right? So when they're about 6 to 8 weeks, right, we're going to give them their first C, D, and T, right? Clostridium perfringens, type C and D, and tetanus. That's what the letters stand for. They get it at about 6 weeks. They get it again a month later. And after that, it's just once a year. And for that particular animal, It doesn't matter what time of the year they get it, just as long as they're getting it once a year. So for mama's protection, that's all she needs. But something we can do. We recommend giving it 30 days before lambing or kidding. Right? Why would I do that? Why am I giving it before lambing or kidding? Lambing or kidding? Yes, right? So when I vaccinate mama 30 days before she gives birth, I'm going to spike the antibodies in the colostrum, right? Because vaccinating her while she's making the colostrum, right, is going to be added protection for the baby, right? So as far as her, if they're just pet goats, it doesn't matter what time of the year you give, right? But we can take advantage of Mother Nature, right, and help boost the immune system of the young. So, we keep like a set season, right? You know when you turn the ram in. Most of them, right, are going to get bred in the first 3 weeks, right, of having your buck in with them. So then you just do the calendar from that, and it'll be an average. Some of them, it'll be 35 days. Some of them, it's going to be 25 days. But just on average, calculating back from when you put the buck in with them, right? So that's another thing. People who keep the buck running with them year round, they can't do that because they don't know, right? 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 Well, but it's important to have that set season, right? Because everything I've talked about, right? If you're going to feed them in groups and you got some that are a month old and some that are 5 months old, they can't fight with each other for the same. You can't, going to have to go feed them separately. So people think it's going to be easier, but it's not. Right? So, all right. Let's see how much time I got. Okay, I'm doing good. All right. So let's talk about adults, yearlings, right? So we get them through babies, like I said, kids, they're more susceptible to everything, right? So now we got them to they're yearlings, that's kind of your teenage stage, and adult problems. I kind of divide these into categories, right? Parasites, once they get to be a year old, you're going to have less problems with coccidia. By that time, they've usually been exposed and got a little bit of immunity to it. But homuncus is still a problem. Respiratory diseases, right? These can be bacterial or parasitic, neurologic, and then hoof diseases. Right? So staying with the neurologic diseases, there's two, and I always put these on the same slide. Two very different problems, right? Very different treatments. But at some stages, they can look the same. So big fancy words, listeriosis. Sheep and goats are very sensitive to, right? There's the big fancy medical names, but I like the common names, right? Because it tells you what they do. This is called circling disease. Right? And the symptoms of this is first, one side of their face will start to droop, like, they've had a stroke or something. And then they tilt their head, and then they literally start walking in circles, right? Because it's an infection of the brain, right? And one side of their brain isn't functioning, right? And they'll tilt and just start walking in circles over and over again. Within 24 hours, they're down and can't get up, right? They get this infection. This bacteria comes from moldy hay or any kind of rotting vegetation. So if you've had feed in the trough that's got wet, right, it's then rotting plant material, any kind of moldy hay, right, that's where this comes from. Right? You can treat it with antibiotics, but not always successful, often fatal. But if you catch it early enough, antibiotics can help. Now the other one, polioencephalomyelitis, big long word again. They call this one stargazing disease, right? Because the first sign is they're going to be out in the field just looking up, confused. Right? The first symptom with this one is they lose their vision. So they're standing up there looking at the stars because they can't see anything and they're confused. With this one, then they go down. They can't get up and eventually start seizuring and die. Both of these can progress in 24 hours. So I put these on the same slide because if you find something that's down and it can't get up, right, if you're in those later stages, a lot of times you can't tell them apart. With polio, though, it's not a brain infection. It's a lack of vitamin B1. B1 is thiamine, right? And whether you feed on too much sulfur, right? Distiller's grain should never be over a third of the diet in any species, right? So yeah, distiller's grain always less than a third of the diet, right? Certain types of plant material or any digestive upset, right? Most ruminants, right, when they have a healthy digestive system, they make their own B vitamins. We don't have to feed them B vitamins. They make them themselves. It's really cool. But that's a healthy digestive system. If they're off feed and not eating, they can always get this, right? So if I find one that's down and can't get up, right, and I can't tell which one it was, I give it antibiotics and B vitamins. So for neurologic diseases, that's usually the route we go. Right? There are a few other. So meningeal worm, you know, earlier I said that sheep get sheep worms, cows get cow worms, you know, chickens get chicken worms, right? Meningeal worm is kind of weird, right? So meningeal worm is just a common worm of deer, white-tailed deer. Now, sheep and goats are very similar to deer. So when they consume this parasite, it starts to develop the life cycle, and then it says, man, what am I doing here? This isn't where I belong. And the worm gets confused, and it goes to the spinal cord, right? And will make a big cyst in the spinal cord. So whether that, kind of depending on whether that cyst is in the neck, but it's usually somewhere in the mid-back range, right? It'll affect the back legs, right? They'll start getting really weak, and then they'll be unable to get up, right? With this one, they're not completely down. They're usually dog sitting, right? Because if the damage is somewhere mid-back, their front legs can still function fine, right? So when I see one dog sitting, right, with their back end down but up on the front end, this is almost usually your problem, right? And I'm going to tell you to keep deer off your farm, but, you know, easier said than done, right? In Kentucky, this is going to happen occasionally. Right? Rabies is uncommon, but possible. Right? Usually get it from a skunk bite. Skunks are rabies carriers. We have seen an uptick this year in rabies. Saw a horse with it in Boyle County. And we've seen multiple dogs this year. So if you've got animals, make sure they're rabies vaccinated, dogs and cats. We don't typically vaccinate our livestock, but it is an option. You can. Right? Usually what I see as symptoms, you know, they're not in the movie. They're not, you know, the typical aggressive. In our livestock, it usually presents as a choke. They're sitting there, they're slobbering. They look like they're choking. So this is another one. I always throw a slide up, right? This is what we call a zoonotic disease. Right? So you find one and you're like, you look at that picture and you're like, what is that on his mouth? And you go up and you start like scraping it, trying to see what that gunk is, right? Is it feed? No, this is sore mouth and it's contagious to people. Like you touch that, you're gonna have a big sore on your hand that will not go away for like 6 weeks. It's painful, it's awful. This is the same type of virus as chickenpox. Once they get it, get over it, they're fine. But super contagious and can run through a group. And as it's running through them, you can imagine that animal probably doesn't want to eat a whole lot because that hurts, right? But if you haven't had it on your farm, always ask when you're buying animals, do you have sore mouth, right? Because there are some that will be chronic carriers. So moving into respiratory diseases, right? They can be viral, they can be bacterial, or they can be verminous. I like that word. Right? So when we look at that, viruses are contagious. right? You can get this, especially if they've been through a sale barn. Like your kids going to school, when you go throw them into groups of kids from all different environments, that's how viruses spread. Bacterial pneumonia. Bacterial pneumonia is usually secondary to a virus. And then the verminous, right, that's your lungworms, right? We don't see lungworms, in cattle as much, but in sheep and goats it is a problem, right? The only dewormer that will kill lungworms is valbazen. And you've got to give it twice because it only kills the adult worms, right? So you've got to give valbazen, right? Wait 3 weeks for the immature ones to develop and then deworm them again. So that's something that I always mention. Not all of your dewormers will get lungworms. So if you've got a snotty nose, right? Now, what did I say about bacteria and viruses? They cause a fever. Do parasites cause a fever? No. So I see a snotty nose and coughing. What am I going to do? Take its temperature, right? Because that's going to rule in which one of those it is. All right. Another one, sheep and goats, this is the biggie, right? How many people had cows before they got into sheep and goats? All right, good. All right, because that actually almost makes it harder. Cattle get foot rot, but it's not the same. Sheep and goats are very, very different here. So there's 2 bacteria and 2 different conditions. When I talk about foot scald, right, this is interdigital between the toes, dermatitis, right? This is caused by Fusobacterium, right? That bacteria is naturally in all the environments, right? These aren't house pets. They're going to be in mud from time to time. That's going to happen. So if they're standing in a lot of water and a lot of mud, maybe they get a rock in between their toes and it irritates it, what you end up with is an infection. It's just raw and wet, right? You see it in between those toes, right? That is foot scald. Right? Okay, hold that thought. Foot rot, whole different beast, right? So foot rot, right? You got to have that first bacteria, but we said it's everywhere. But then there's a second bacteria that comes in. And, and just like your kid, when they hang out with that one buddy, it gets awful, right? That's where you get trouble. The second one, this is the bad guy, Dichelobacter, right? This bacteria is super, super contagious. I had one farmer, he had, 300 sheep. He got this in his herd. Only thing he could do was sell every one of them and let the field rest for a month, right? I mean, it can be that devastating, right? So with foot rot, once it gets its buddy, what the combination of these 2 bacteria do is they eat through that hard hoof wall. So the foot scald was just, the skin in between. But when these 2 bacteria get together, it will eat big holes in the foot. Like I've seen, this picture is one I took. But when I started investigating that wound, I could see the bone sticking out, right? So that is a bad, bad deal. Always, 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 when you're buying something, pick those feet up and look at them, right? If you catch it early enough, like the one that's been trimmed there, you can give them antibiotics and you can treat it, foot baths, and get them over it, but that thing's never going to look normal again, right? So a lot of times, if they've had foot rot in the past and you go to buy them, when you pull that foot up, it's just going to be lumpy and the growth pattern won't be healthy. Because the problem is after you get them over it, a large percentage of them will end up being chronic carriers, right? So their foot doesn't grow right, but they get over it, they're still contaminating the pastures, right? So you don't want to bring it in. When you bring in an animal, always quarantine it, right? And if it's limping, do not buy it, right? Because it's probably one of the most devastating diseases as far as a herd goes. All right. So trimming period is going to help. So both of these bacteria are anaerobic as well, right? So when I said anaerobic, anti-air, right? So when you go to trim hooves, you know how that wall, like the outside wall, like folds under? What does that do? It creates that pocket the air's not getting to. So number one, keeping them trimmed, right, keeps air getting to that foot as a preventative, okay? All right, so after that, we said now the contagious one shouldn't have it on the farm, right, as far as that goes. And when you do have one, you're going to trim the foot up really good, you're going to give it antibiotics, and then there's a foot bath. You'll use goat's copper sulfate, zinc sulfate, and sheep. There's a difference there. But you'll make special foot baths to walk them through, and that's about the only way to get rid of it. Did that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Foot bath for goats, it's copper sulfate. Right? Zinc sulfate for sheep. Right? Because some of that we keep sheep away from copper. Yeah. Probably oxytetracycline. Yeah. All right, bear with me, guys. I know I've been talking forever. Last category. I said you're not going to see a whole lot of bucks with uterus problems, right? So let's talk about, our breeding females. All right, so our reproductive diseases, I'm going to be honest with you. There's 5 of them. There's also Cache Valley I don't have up there, right? Toxoplasmosis, chlamydia, Q fever, right? These are almost, you just can't tell them apart without doing an necropsy, and they're all different causes. So if you have something that's had stillborns, right, or miscarriages in that last trimester, right, you always want to send the baby and the placenta, send both of them, to the diagnostic lab, because depending on which one it is, you're going to treat them differently, right? All right, and ladies, when it comes to a dystocia or pulling lambs, right, we've got an advantage. Our hands are smaller, right? We can get into some tight spots, right? So it's easier. But with these repro diseases, 4 of the 5 are contagious to people, right? Toxoplasmosis, anyone heard that from anywhere else? That's the same thing that's in a cat's litter box that pregnant women can't touch, right? So if you're pregnant, if there is anybody else there to pull a lamb, let them do it, right? It's not worth risking your own baby, right? So pregnant women, do not assist in labor if you can at all help it, and if you can't, make sure you got gloves and a mask on, right? But, so toxoplasmosis, like I talked about cat litter boxes, sheep and goats get it the same way, usually your barn cat pooping in your feed, all right? Chlamydia, that's a sexually transmitted disease. Q fever is aerosol. Blue tongue, they get from flies, and Cache Valley, they get from flies, right? So those could become a little bit more difficult, but by doing a necropsy, if you know which one caused it, it's going to tell you how to prevent it. All right. So nutrition of the pregnant doe. Right. So this is a big thing I harp on. Lost Dr. Valens here, but this is important. Right. I always recommend ultrasound in these guys. Right. So if you got sheep and goats, have your vet ultrasound them when they're about 45 days bred, because, right, when we talk about fetal development, right, the first 2 trimesters, first and second trimester, the baby's developing, like all the organs are developing. But 60-70% of the baby growth happens in the last trimester. Now, when we start talking about trimesters, we're talking about 3-month periods, right? Well, these girls are only pregnant 5 months, right? Their last trimester is 6 weeks, So that little lamb is going to do 70% of its growth in that last 6 weeks. Okay? All right? Hold that thought. All right. So when 6 weeks before she gives birth, that little lamb's probably only about the size of a mouse. And it's going to go from that to 8 pounds, like 4 or 5 weeks. Right? That's fast. Right? Yeah. Y'all, I got a friend, and like from the day she found out she was pregnant, she's like, I'm eating for 2, right? It didn't work out well. She's still on a treadmill, right? Because those first trimesters, she didn't eat a whole lot of extra calories because it wasn't growing much, right? But that last trimester, that's when they do start eating for 2. But wait a minute, right? What's different about sheep and goats than cows, right? They have multiples. Eating for 2 and eating for 5 is very different, right? And you're going to have to feed her differently, right? So if they're having triplets, if they're having quads, right, they're going to need more nutrients. Right? That makes sense. And when you ultrasound them right there at 45 days, on the ultrasound screen, you can sit there and count them 1, 2, 3. Right? And you can put the ones having triplets in this pen and the ones having singles in this pen and feed them differently. Right. So I just said to feed her more, right? I didn't say that. Y'all take a look at this girl. You feed her more, where's she going to put it? Right? Look at that, right? I mean, I could throw all the feed I want to in front of her, but where's it going to go? If she's got quads in there, she got 4 babies in that belly, there is physically no space for the food to go. So I can't simply just give her more feed, right? Alfalfa has a lot more nutrients than regular grass hay, right? Something that's going to be a higher percentage of protein, right? So it's not just a matter of throwing more food at her, right? We're going to have to feed her something that's going to be more concentrated, right? All right. Or else, right, what happens is glucose, right? That's energy. If she's putting all of her nutrients into that baby, her blood glucose will drop, but also calcium, right? Because as those babies are growing, their bones are growing, right? So they're sucking all the calcium she's got out of her system, right? Our muscles to contract, right? They've got to have calcium to function. So what happens with these girls is when the babies are just simply sucking all of the nutrients out of her, right? She gets down, she can't get up. All right, once again, our bucks and rams aren't going to have a whole lot of mastitis, right? They don't have udders, right? So when we talk about mastitis, it can be 2 different forms. We either put it in environmental, right? Environmental is, usually I see it when you got dirty kidding pens or you're not cleaning your kidding pens enough. Because think about it, when she's giving birth, she lays down in that jug and there's all those fluids, right, that go everywhere. And her teats are laying right in the middle of it. So number 1, you risk mastitis from the bacteria getting into those teats. And then 2, when she does stand up, the baby's going to get a mouthful of feces, right? So keeping your kidding pens clean will prevent environmental causes. And then there are contagious causes as well. For instance, in dairy goats, staph can be a contagious type of mastitis, right? So anytime you have mastitis, what you can do is get a milk sample and you send it to the diagnostic lab, and depending on what bacteria they find, they're going to tell you whether it was because of her environment or contagious. Cleaning them once a day is the most important thing. Right, and so, we talked about coccidia earlier as well. So coccidia eggs, when they first come out in the feces, they're really easy to clean up. But after 24 hours, coccidia eggs do what we call sporulate. They get this coating on the outside of them that make them almost impossible to kill. So if you're having a lot of coccidia problems at a month old, it usually goes back to kidding pens, right? So cleaning once a day, depending on, I don't care if it's shavings, I don't care if it's straw, but just cleaning once a day. All right, yeah, and so some of these, this can look, in the picture in the top, that's a dairy goat, and she was fine. She came in one day, and it was just a little lopsided. The milk looked normal, but one side was bigger, right? What we found in that girl was staph, a contagious type of mastitis, right? Picture at the bottom. That poor girl, I went out to look at her. She was in so much pain, and I tried to just strip out the milk. I was being real gentle. The teat came off in my fingers, right? Because what can happen is when they get that environmental, like an E. coli mastitis, they can get gangrene, right? Y'all have heard of that, like soldiers used to get it, and they'd have to amputate. Right? So if you touch the udder, right, with mastitis, and it's hot and it's hard, right, that's the first sign of infection. But as the infection progresses, if you're not checking them, if you don't catch it early enough, and you touch that udder and it's cold to the touch or turning blue, that usually means that you've got gangrene and it's no longer getting blood to it. So, it's still treatable, when it's hot and hard. But by the time it gets to that, it can be really, really nasty. All right, just a couple others that I throw in here, CAE and OPP, right? CAE is in sheep, CAE is in goats, OPP in sheep. Very similar viruses. They can do a whole lot of things. They can cause arthritis, pneumonia, encephalitis, mastitis, or just chronic weight loss. They're transmitted through the colostrum. Right, so they are contagious. Usually a long incubation period. You see it in older adult animals. They can hold it for a long time and be spreading it before they show symptoms. Testing for this, or when you're buying animals, ask if the animals have been tested. Ask if they've ever had these viruses on their farm. Right? And the last one I'm going to mention, right, is CLs. So this is Corynebacterium pseudotuberculosis, right, big fancy word. Once again, a super contagious disease. When you buy someone, ask them if they've ever had this problem. But it causes abscesses in the lymph nodes. And they're kind of classic. You see where the red dots are? Those are where the major lymph nodes are in our bodies, right? So what will happen is one of those lymph nodes will abscess, and you'll just see a big abscess, usually on the jaw, right? But it can be on the back of the udder or in the flank, right? When those abscesses rupture, the pus gets into the environment, right? And it's super contagious. So that's something else. If you don't have it on your farm, you don't want it. If you do, talk to your vet about control methods, because once you start seeing that knot, it's going to have to be quarantined and carefully lanced. All right, so that's all I got. Any questions? Thank y'all. I know that was a lot of information. Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. I can, but that's going to be a big ask. He's asking for types of equipment and feeders that sheep and goats can't poop in. They got talent. I don't think you were here when I said they poop in the troughs on purpose, right? But they do. That is a big problem, and that is how like a lot of these fecal oral things get transmitted. So yes, and actually I have. I don't know if you guys know Steve Higgins or not. Right? I and Steve Higgins have been getting into some shenanigans, designing different types of feeders and equipment. I said, the way his brain works, he said he's super intelligent. But we've been playing around with some of these things. Yes?
When you drench them, how do you do it again? Like what side?
It doesn't matter what side, but there's that little attachment. You'll get the drench syringe, and it has this metal thing on the end of it. You screw it on, make sure it's screwed on tight. Oh, I've seen that happen before. Make sure it's screwed on tight. Lost my clicker. All right. And then you'll just get it in the back of the mouth. Like I said, it's got like a blunt or a round little thing on the end of it, so you're not going to puncture anything. But you go in the side and get it all the way in the back of the mouth and then squirt it in. Okay. Anybody else? Yes. Yes, I will. I'm going to hang out for a little bit. Like I said, I miss this place. So yeah, I'll hang out as long as Edwin over here will let me. You're not going to kick me out, are you? No? All right. Yeah.
Well, let's give Dr. Lay a hand. Well, lunch is here, so you can, if you're here for the first time, you want to exit, make a left, the restrooms, and make another left, you can go to the restroom. The lunch is out as you exit the doors to the back. Okay, and we'll go ahead and get started back at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch. Okay, I guess we're gonna go ahead and get started. I hope everyone enjoyed the lunch. We have the distinct pleasure of having a farmer here from Franklin County, Ms. Jessica Lopez, and she will be giving a farmer guide to goat and sheep from hoof to harvest. So at this time, let's give Ms. Lopez our undivided attention.
How was lunch? I had the pork, and it was fantastic. So, anyone that had the pork, it was good. Okay, my name is Jessica Lopez. I'm here in Franklin County. We are a small farm. There's the entire family. It's my husband, myself, my 4 children, 2 of them in which they came today. It's a family-owned farm specializing in sustainable living, hard work, 100% handmade crafts with love and care, plus hands-on education, farm market, tours, and more. I'm going to speed through these. That way, if you all have questions, you all can ask me towards the end. So these are our small hooved animals. So we do raise goats and sheep together. I'm going to have Dr. Lay, plug her ears for majority of my presentation. So we raise Spanish goats. Both of our small hooved animals are heritage breeds. Does anybody here raise heritage anything? I didn't purposely want heritage breeds. That's just how the cookies crumbled. That's just kind of what fell in our lap. For Spanish goats, they're very hardy, thrive on rough forages, excellent mothers, good for hands-off farming, considered a dual breed with meat and dairy. For our family, they're considered a tri-breed because we also keep their pelts and their skulls for European mounts. So technically it's a tri-breed for our family. The Shetland sheep, also a heritage breed. They're calm, docile, intelligent, easy care breed, excellent mothers, and they have prized wool. Same kind of thing here. We do render their wool, and we also keep their pelts as well with wool and then with it sheared off. Our number one goal is to raise healthy animals, being our number one thing is meat. We want to raise 100% of our own meat. And in order to do that, you need healthy animals. So we are very conscientious of water, minerals, pasture, hay, rotating pasture, supplement minerals, monitor for worms, and we only deworm when needed. And then because we produce our meat, if you do deworm, make sure you read the labels, because there is a drying period you need if you do give them antibiotics, or if you give them deworming, they will have a label that says they must be dried off before slaughter. And then you can see some of our goats. That particular picture on the left, I was talking with Dr. Carr and Dr. Lay. Our number one problem is fencing, and we do not dehorn anything. So when they have horns, and they typically it's between 5 and 10 stuck in the fence opportunities that they get, then we will duct tape sticks to their horns. So they will not get stuck in the fence, and we're not constantly looking and having to get them out. So again, this is our mama Elvira. She just got sheared. And then this is her lamb from 2 years ago, still fully wooled. So here, because we process our own meat, we want healthy animals. So whenever we're looking, they do have a judging criteria. When you're looking at your livestock, you don't want them obese, and you don't want them too skinny. The skinnier they are and the younger they are, the less meat you're going to get. So typically, if you're going to process a year-old lamb or goat, you're not going to get a significant amount of meat. So if you're not willing to wait for the 2-year mark or older, then you're not going to have that much meat. And then once they hit a year old, they're still technically considered lamb, but older than 1, it's considered mutton. So here on the left, you can see that is a fully dressed out mutton that we did. That one, I believe, was 5 years old and still intact. Before this current year, we did not ban anything. But because of our location, our size of our farm, we are not able to separate everybody adequately. So this year we started banding. So no more than 1 buck and 1 ram at a time. There's your basic cuts. Again, just remember, these are not your beef. So you're not gonna get, you got a 1,000-pound cow and you're only gonna get 400 or 500 pounds of meat. Well, they're much smaller. So you're looking at 100-pound lamb, you're gonna get maybe 40 to 50 pounds of meat. So it's significantly lower. But the older they get, the more meat they pack on. And then again, if you do give grain, just remember that will put fat on them. So, and then when you start putting more fat on your animal, then you come into health risk. So I do know some of the people that we provide meat with, they don't like fatty animals. They want their intestines still all intact. So if they're fatty, those intestines will rip. So the least amount of fat that they want, then that's what it is. And then whenever you are learning to process, you really need to get familiar with the anatomy. I do everything with a knife, a rubber mallet, and a hatchet. I don't use any type of machinery. I don't use saws, and that's my personal preference. I just choose not to. So knowing where all the joints are, knowing where you can literally just take a knife and break it, makes life so much easier. So you don't have to worry about power. You don't need to worry about batteries being charged or what have you. All you need is a good, sharp knife. And then knowing what you are looking for when you process. You do need to learn the respiratory system. You need to learn the digestion of both of these species. And then what to look for. So there's been times I shoot Dr. Lay pictures, like, what is this? 90% of the time, they're lymph nodes. And you can cut open a lymph node, and you can tell a lot by that animal just looking at the insides of those lymph nodes. Again, I'm very, very minimal when it comes to processing. And again, just knowing where to cut so you don't need the heavy machinery. And if you can do a deer, then you can do a lamb and a goat. And then this is the finished product. It's fantastic meat. A lot of people say that they don't like the taste of goat, but I will say it depends on how you cook it. We cook goat all the time. They're not, well, before this year, all of them were still intact. And everyone swears that they can taste the taint of any intact male when you eat the meat. We cannot tell you if it was a female versus a male. It's all in how you cook it. In the simple cuts, for your more pretty cuts, such as your chops or your rack of lamb, your roast, that's all based on your presentation and how you cut it yourself. Again, if you know the anatomy, if you know the bones, the vertebrae, exactly where you're going, you can get in between those vertebrae and practically get it off fairly easy with a knife. Like, you don't have to do all the heavy cutting and chipping the bones when you don't need to. I don't like little sharp bones in my food, so I choose this way versus the other. And then packaging, again, it's all in your presentation. They look better when they're cut nicely. I will say that I have, there's pruning shears that will get the ribs really, really nicely, and they're not leaving all those bone fragments when you do it. And again, it looks fantastic in a package. And all of this is with a food saver, so it's doable. And then again, up there at the top, all of the chops, the lamb chops, again, that is with a mallet and a hatchet. And you can get a really decent looking chop just with doing that. So okay, and we do offer in-person education on if you ever wanted to learn how to do it yourself. I do offer hands-on classes. Not all of my classes, you don't have to be hands-on. If you want to just come and learn how to do something just standing back, I do offer that as well. We are definitely a no-judgment farm. We've had people out crying and they need to step away. We've had, you name it, we've had it. Now, I do like to pick on teenagers. They're fun. They can't stand the snapping of the bones. They get woozy and they have to sit down. So I will pick on teenage boys. So does anyone have any questions? Oh. Mm-hmm. Without banding, so for personal experience, we can't tell you that there's any different in the meat versus a intact male versus a non-intact male. Now, the withers, they'll have more fat because their energy isn't running amok. But we've never, and again, it's how you cook it. I mean, we've had someone that did a outdoor spick, like a rotisserie spick outdoors. It tasted just like the goat smelled, and I couldn't eat it. But it was one of our goats, and he was still intact. So now we eat intact males, and you can't tell whether it was the male or the female. So again, if your tastes are really fine, maybe. Mm-hmm. Okay. You need to have a male hog intact, or Cut the male hog, okay. 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 Now, our beef is still walking in the field, and he is intact. His days are numbered. But for pigs, we've always killed female pigs. We've never done intact males. Yeah, okay, well, that's good to know. So anyone processing your own pork, make sure you cut them. Cut the males. Yeah. So castrate your pigs. Okay, is there? To get a good, decent size, so the main goat on there was our main breeding buck, and he is 6. He's 6 years old, and he weighs 175. So you're looking at maybe 100, 115 pounds of meat from him. But again, he's 6. However, his number one purpose isn't meat. So if you're looking for the biggest bang for your buck, you're looking at like a boar, the boar goat. Like they're strictly meat. This guy actually, my other daughter that's not here today, she did an essay contest. And the winning of said contest, you got a herd of goats. That's how we started into these goats, because she won the contest. She won 5 does and 1 buck. And all the does were already bred with another buck. So she got them in November. Come February, we had 13 goats. So we got into goats really quick. And another reason we got this breed was because we do more than just meat with them. Because we do their pelts, we do their skulls, you can milk these. According to Livestock Conservancy, they do produce quite a bit of milk. We just don't milk them because we've got dairy cows. They do produce quite a bit of milk as well. But if you're looking for the biggest bang for your buck for meat, you're probably needing your more commercial goats that are going to grow quick, because these guys don't grow quick. So I do European mounts. So a lot of people call my house the house of death because I've got skulls and pelts and furs everywhere. So for me, I go to these small fairs and then I sell bones. And literally, they're the skulls with the very beautiful horns that come out. So I sell the skull itself. So I do a European mount, and people eat it up. They love it. Same thing. I will tan them and process the pelts, and then they can be wall hangers, they can be rugs, you can make clothing with them. So there's all kinds of stuff you can do with the pelts as well. Yeah.
Process the goats, you ever any clients ever ask for the skin on?
I had one couple that came out, and it kind of sucks because I want the skin, because I want the pelt. But they wanted everything. They wanted skull, they wanted skin, everything. So they processed it, they skinned it still whole. Like they didn't cut the middle of it. So after they processed the meat, they stuck all the meat back in the pelt, almost like a bag, so that they could take it back home, and they were going to cook it in the pelt in the ground. So that's a method that they cooked with. So yeah, it breaks my heart when they take the pelt with them, but anybody else? Yeah. I'm sure I've heard a whole lot worse. That's a good question. Now, we have killed some lambs. Well, oh, I'm sorry. He's asking if you just bred your goats with the male with the females, and if you take the buck away and you want to have them processed right then, will that have an effect on the meat? For goats, I'm uncertain because we always process our goats in the spring because that's when our babies are due. For mutton, we cannot tell a difference because I will process mutton in the fall. And with that particular breed, they only come in heat in the fall. So they're the seasonal, which our Spanish goats can breed year round, but we keep them separated. But for the sheep, could not tell a difference whatsoever. But again, it could be your personal taste buds. That could be it too. Right. And again, I've also had someone ask me, you can't let the hair or the wool touch the meat because then that does it. It's almost impossible to skin any type of animal and not have a piece of hair get on that meat. It's almost impossible. I mean, it's impossible. So again, there's people that just have super sensitive taste buds. Yes.
So you have your goat out in the field running around eating. What's in the field? What type of grasses, warm season, cool season grasses do you have to replenish those?
Now, Cindy, I don't know what's out in that field. So she's asking what's in the fields. We do not monitor our grass in the fields, but we do rotational graze, so they're constantly grazing. We do not grain them unless they are actively in lactation. We do plenish hay whenever the grass is not in adequate length. As for what grasses we have, I have no idea. None whatsoever. We do soil samples every year. We never, if we put any type of grass seed out, it's just Kentucky bluegrass seed. And that's only if we have the funds. Otherwise, it's just whatever grows. Our weeds are gone. Our fields are weed-free because of them goats. They will literally do anything they can to get to the other side of the fence versus sheep. They're content. So if I had to do over to pick, if I had to choose between the two, I would go sheep. Yeah. So typically we'll do physical examinations and then we will talk with our vet and then they will give us some like vitamin injections if they need it. We do Bose, what Dr. Lay had talked about earlier, we do that for our goats. But we work really well with our vet so then they can tell us like what do we need. We do have the minerals for everybody. So we are those people that do it for everybody, but we do give the extra supplementation for our goats because we know their needs are a little bit higher, especially for copper. Yeah. No. Well, our farm doesn't work like your typical farm. I will say that first. So we do have cattle. So we have 3 cows. Wish it was 2, but again, he's still walking. So they're pretty good at keeping things out. Even sheep, if they want to be over there and that sheep's there, they're going to push it out of the way. But we do have a Great Pyrenees. So he's out there. We got him, I think, when he was a month old, and he has been out there the entire time. So those goats are his goats. We had to retrain him when we got into sheep because he would constantly chase the sheep. So he's doing better now. He will kind of still, if he barks at the flying predators, the sheep just run away automatically. But the Pyrenees has really done his job. Now, we had a donkey before, but he was no good for us. So, but the Pyrenees has been great, other than he's killing our deer, which sucks because we like to eat them too. So, but our predator control is our Great Pyrenees. So he does wander. But luckily, we do have some more dogs, but they're the chicken predator control because they're in our backyard, so they guard the chickens. So when he gets out of the yard or out of the fields, he'll get in the backyard with the other dogs to play. So it's kind of a win-win. But he has been known to, go up into the neighbor's barn and come back. But he can get out at any time he wants. He just jumps the fence. So it's just a matter of every time he does it, we always have to put him back. Like he has to, okay, you got to go back to that field. Because he'll switch fields. Because we've got 3 rotational fields, and he'll just go to whichever field he feels like he's needed. But it was a lot of work training the dog. Yeah. Anybody else? No? That's my thing. Oh, Cindy. Don't get goats. It's either don't get goats or have better fencing. So it's one of the two. But if you're on the fence, literally, pun intended, on sheep or goats, go sheep. Because the sheep will literally, they don't care about the other side of that fence. Those goats will be on the other side of that fence quicker than you can blink your eye every single time, every time. And especially if you've got big goats. If you got bigger goats, just hop right over it. You wanted Nigerian dwarf, is that? Okay, well, they, yeah. So ours are too big. If they put their front 2 hooves on the fence, like they're squashing it. And the next thing you know, he's over the fence. And I was explaining to Dr. Carr earlier, he will jump out of our property to jump back into our property to be with the girls. So he's currently tied to a tree because he doesn't listen. So, and again, like I was explaining to Dr. Carr earlier, we banned now any male, which we prefer males, because I don't want to kill females, because I feel like they need to be sold and they need to produce more, because we've got some pretty good females. We're the #1 farm that we really, really want males, because we want to eat them. Like our #1 goal is to eat them. So if you have males, then you don't have a problem. You just band them. The main buck's not trying to breed them. Makes life so much easier. So don't have more than 1 buck. It makes it complete madness. Now, I will say, if you do raise them, this will be quick. If you raise them together, the sheep and the goats, they cannot crossbreed, but they think they can. Our ram is trying so hard to breed our goats. So when there was one goat that we had, she would get stuck in the fence. He would wear her out. But it's the wrong species. So once we would get her out, then she would turn and she would knock the tar out of him. But it can be madness if you have more than 1 male of anything. So, yeah. Is that it? All right. Thank you.
And thank you again, Ms. Lopez. I know everyone got something out of that. Ms. Lopez, it's always a pleasure hearing from you and learning from you. Next, we have the opportunity of hearing from Dr. Sarah Carr here at Kentucky State University. She will be discussing with us practical approaches to selecting breeding stock in small ruminants. So at this time, let's give our undivided attention to Dr. Carr.
Way back. Okay. I'm Sarah Carr. I am faculty here at Kentucky State University, and I specialize in reproductive physiology. So, as I was joking with Jessica, I'm probably not going to solve your fencing problems, nor am I going to be able to probably solve the parasite problem, so I apologize for that. But I can help in other ways, and again, that's very reproduction specific, and I do specialize in small ruminants. The goal, or the way I've set up this presentation, is where, say you want to go buy new breeding stock, and you're gonna go to a sale. In sheep, you oftentimes see graded sales, whether it's your Katahdins, or they'll have, some St. Croix, Dorpers. Goats is a little less common, but we're still gonna go with it today. So the idea is you're gonna go to a sale and you need to buy breeding stock. So how are we gonna approach this? What are we gonna do? What do we need to consider? I hate listening to myself talk up here. I get, I'll just share. I get very nervous, and I always have, I always will. So I'm gonna talk for a few minutes, and then we're actually gonna go to the back where we have some bucks pooled, and you're gonna tell me who we're gonna buy and why. So it's gonna be fun. We're gonna measure testicular size. It's always a good time when we go out there. All right, so practical approaches. You'll oftentimes hear people say, those are pretty sheep, or those are pretty goats, and they'll just look at them and say, oh, they look nice. I think that's the one I might wanna go with. But a good goat, or a good sheep, I'm gonna mix it up like Dr. Lay all day, just go with it. A good one is one that makes us money, and that's the most important thing when we're here, is trying to figure out how we're gonna get those dollars. So who makes us money? Well, it depends. So what is your all's goal with your goats? Okay, learning. Yes, okay, so for meat, for market. Was it goats or sheep? Yes. Goats. What's your goal? Are you meat? Neither. What's your, just. Perfect. It's a good goal. It still matters. Okay. Who else? What is your all's goal? End goal? Is it meat? Is it? Perfect. All right, do we have any dairy people? That's good, because this is not made for dairy people. All right, so the goals, it depends on your goal. When we have to figure out our goals for our dams and our sires, the dams we want to either be fertile and prolific, meaning that they are able to get pregnant, produce, and then also wean their live lambs or kids. We want them to be able to physically get pregnant and then get it to weaning. During that time, we also want them to grow fast quality lambs or kids. If you're going for meat, you want that to actually be a good product. We don't want to just throw something in the food system and hope for the best. If we're talking about our sires, so our rams and our bucks, this is an either-or situation. We want to maximize genetics, and I'll talk a little bit more about this genetic concept as we talk about traits for these different animals. For the sires, we want them to be able to produce our replacements, or we want them to be able to produce pounds of meat. As you know, and it's been said today, that our dams and our sires, each to an individual animal, will contribute 50%. I'm going to start here talking about the dams for a few minutes, and then we'll go into the sires because that'll lead into our evaluations. So the dam, again, prolific wean lambs, and they need to be fast-growing and quality. All right. The first traits we want to think about when we talk about dams are these fertility traits. You'll hear these, if you're getting more technical, these are your conception rates, our pregnancy rates. So if they have the ability to get pregnant, whether or not once they're pregnant, if they are able to keep that embryo or fetus, or then the lambing and kidding rates. So that refers to how many actually hit the ground and hit the ground alive. The next thing we want to think about is prolificacy. And so, as we talked about earlier, compared to cattle, our small ruminants have multiples. And that's what we're referring to when we're talking about prolificacy, which is how many that they have. This is for sheep, so we want to shoot for about 200% crop, and that's for both sheep and goats, 200%. That means that for each ewe or doe that is giving birth, they have twins. This will help to maximize while minimizing how many you either have to have adopted by another one, which can be difficult, or to bottle feed. Bottle babies don't do well. They grow slowly. They end up forgetting that they're an animal and they become your pet. We just don't want to do that. And what it means, if we are able to have 2 animals on 2 teats, we are able to maximize that potential of the animals. And over the lifetime of that breeding ewe or doe, she is going to basically make you more money. Right now we're sitting at about, depending on the species and depending on the breed, we're sitting anywhere between 130 to about 170% prolificacy across the board. So we really want to try to hit that 200%. Now I put the fin sheep up there because those will regularly throw quads, and that's, in my opinion, that's terrifying, and I'm not really trying to push that. If that's for you, kudos, but not. Our Katahdins are sitting at about 130%. All right, if we want to get our ewes to be more prolific, so prolificacy is a trait that can be passed down from the dam and the buck to the kids or the. Anyway, they can be passed down. So once they're prolific, though, to get it, we first want to select those genetics. This is where things like the NSIP program, does anyone know what that is or use it? Okay, I'm not advocating for it because, again, I'm not a rep. But the NSIP program, National Sheep Improvement Program, which also works for goats, basically can tell you how genetically superior animals are, particularly within your own herd or flock. But in some cases, it can be used to evaluate across the board in those same breeds. It can help you select the best genetic animals out of your own so that when you are saving back your replacements, you are able to make the most informed decision. The next thing we can do is use crossbreeding. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a little bit. We want to cull underperforming ewes. So if she is not getting pregnant, some people will cull as stringently as if she doesn't get pregnant this breeding season, she's gone. Others may give her a second chance. So you don't want to keep a non-fertile, non-prolific animal in your herd or flock over and over and over again, because you're also going to continue, if she does get pregnant, you're going to continue her not desired traits. The next thing you want to do, and this is less traits and more on what you can do, but you want to make sure that you are promoting or giving her the best chance to be prolific. The most important one is the nutrition, and we've talked about it a bit today, so I'm not going into it, but you can flush her before breeding season. That gives her, it's basically where you up their nutrition just a little bit. You're basically triggering her body to say, like, yes, you have good energy, yes, you have good reserves, it's okay to reproduce. Because when we have animals, the first system to shut down in a nutrient deficient state is going to be reproduction. It is not vital for maintenance or survival, so if they are nutrient deficient, reproduction's not going to function properly. If the body condition score is too low, they're not going to be able to get pregnant and rebreed. And then meeting the micronutrient needs, copper, selenium, all of the above. Now this chart is just a little bit of data showing how body condition score relates to lambs born. So, oh, interesting. Okay, so we have a scale of 1 to 5 in small ruminants, whereas a 3 is generally considered ideal to a 3.5 or 4. And you can see here, at least this is it's also very interesting. Okay, 3.5 to 4, good, more babies born, more likely to be successful, more likely to get pregnant. Okay, perfect. All right, we also then, like I said, want to have our dams create fast-growing animals that give us lots of meat. What this looks like in terms of heritable traits is our mothering ability, and then also our milk production. What it breaks down to is if our animals can give birth unassisted, we don't want to have to go out there and pull lambs, pull kids, those need to go. We also want them to produce that colostrum and milk that can grow the animals, and we want them to be attentive, encourage their animals to do well, and encourage them to grow. This chart I brought in here because it is relating milk production to animals. So as we're thinking about her ability to produce milk, we want to make sure she can produce milk to the level needed for the amount of kids or lambs that she has. So this shows that if she has, can't point. If she has twins, she's going to actually need to produce much more milk than if she has a single. And if she's unable to do that and to carry her multiples, then she's not someone you may want to keep long term. When she is producing, so this is giving us a chart looking at the daily milk production, which is the black line. That's going to be in our dam. We have pasture intake, which is how much pasture is being consumed by the kid. Well, this one actually is in sheep, so consumed by the lamb, and then we have milk intake. And you can see that as milk intake decreases, pasture intake increases. That makes sense, right? But if we're really relating it to how much is going to be produced in terms of milk from the dam, she needs to be able to produce enough milk for a long enough period of time to basically carry her kids to that point where they start to take in more pasture and less milk. All right, that's it for the dams. So we're gonna switch gears and talk about the sires. The sires are the rams and the bucks. These we want to produce quality replacements or pounds of meat, basically. You could ask yourself, can an animal do both? Technically, yes. Any ram or buck that you have can come in and breed and make a female that can reproduce again. You also can come in and have one that can produce offspring that can provide meat, because you could technically eat any of them. But if we are doing this to try to shoot for both goals, then we are not going to maximize his potential as an individual animal. So if we're going to a sale, we want to optimize his genetics to be able to meet those goals of our production system. Again, this is two paths, and I really want you to think about this in terms of like either or, not both and. So goal 1, replacement females. This kind of happens in 2 different ways. We have seed stock producers. So a seed stock producer is generally going to keep creating these specific traits, these specific characteristics over and over and over again. A lot of times when we are breeding seed stock producers, the goal of the ram is to continue to breed those maternal traits, because the ram or the buck actually can carry maternal traits. Even though he's a male, he can pass those on. So these are those fertility, prolificacy, mothering, milk production that we just talked about. This is where line breeding is common, and because of that, we are able to have one animal get up to 80 to 90% of the genetics in your own herd. If you keep breeding that same animal back into your herd, keeping replacements, etc. Now, if we are trying to take our animals and breed for a specific trait, single trait selection, so selecting only on that trait, is the fastest way to make progress. However, it can also be a fast way to make big mistakes. So you have to be careful on what you're selecting for so that you don't have unintended consequences. Now, line breeding. What's line breeding? This is a question. It's breeding daughters? What's I know you know. What's line breeding? Yeah. I'm sorry. You can go back. So should they breed their daughter, though? That's the next question. Do what? Yes. Yes. So in cattle, that is what I have been taught as well. But here we suggest not. I mean, technically, I guess you could any time, but we promote not doing that. So who should we breed if we're not breeding the daughters, but we're line breeding? We could breed the cousins and granddaughters. So that, as in, that reduces our chance of 4 ears, or extra appendages, or any of those very bad unintended consequences. And so it's not just a one step, but it's kind of like an extra step removed. So we're still using the same ram or buck, and we're still breeding those genetics that we want back into the animals, but we are reducing our chances of those very bad undesired traits. Also, don't breed the sister or the mother. Okay. All right, the other side of this, besides these stock producers, are we have our commercial producers. These are producers who generally want to create replacement females, but in a more, you could say like composite breeds. So here we have, what do we have? Spanish, Savannah, Boer, and Kiko crosses. It is all kind of mixed up in the bucks we're gonna look at. But if you wanted to manage this and where you can keep your own replacement females, then you could do a couple different programs. I'm not gonna go in depth, but basically they require having multiple animals and then switching them. If we are doing this crisscross, you have 2 different breeding animals. One of them has maternal traits that you're selecting for. One of them would have those meat traits, as I call them, or weight traits, as it's oftentimes referred to as well. And you would switch them back and forth, being careful to track who you're breeding to who. If you do the 3-breed rotation, it's the same way, but you add a 3rd sire who is a dual-purpose breed. And so again, you're really watching. We can chat more about that after. I can give you some resources. So don't worry too much about this right now. All right, and the next goal. We're producing pounds of meat, and so if we have a sire that we want to use for this purpose, generally it's commercial operations. If KSU was a production farm, this would be where we fall under, but we do more research. All right, here we're selecting for growth weights, those weaning weights, those survival traits. All of these are hereditable and things that we can select for when we are looking for our breeding stock. These also can contribute to something called terminal breeding, whereas where we have our breeding females, we use a ram or a buck that has traits for growth, but we don't want to keep their offspring as replacements. So we'll do this terminal cross and then send them straight to market and not keep any of the babies. Okay, that's good. If we're thinking about pounds of meat, we can also use those different breeding systems, the 2-cross or the 3-way. And in this case, we are trying to maximize what we call hybrid vigor or heterosis. And basically, it's where you take 2 different animals and then their offspring gives you a superior offspring regarding specific trait or traits that you're looking at. Some of these traits, if they are lowly heritable, such as birth weight and weaning weights, those are the lowest ones here. This is sheep in this chart. They're going to respond best to if you are breeding that hybrid vigor, so 2 different breeds compared to if you're breeding within that same breed. Now, one thing I want to point out, which is interesting, and you'll hear it a lot of time in vernacular, is that people will say carcass traits are highly heritable. We're not really talking about carcass traits in terms of the carcass like Ms. Lopez was talking about. We're actually talking more when we talk about these growth rates and weaning weights and that kind of thing. So the composition of the carcass is the one that we can't really select for in the same way as some of the other traits. All right, this is for our sheep people at least, which is what I've learned is not a lot of you right now. But this would just give a classification of some of the different types of breeds we have. So on the left side, we have what we call our sire breeds. In the middle is our dam breeds, and then we have general purpose. So one thing we commonly see here in Kentucky is a mix between Katahdin, has all of those maternal traits, with Dorper, which tends to have meat traits, and that's how we are able to produce these fast-growing animals with their continued maternal traits in the different flocks. All right, number of sires. So as we're going to a sale, and we have our goals, based on all of that fun information I just gave you. It's important to also know who we're breeding. What I have heard in the room today is that we don't have any massive breeders. So I don't think we would necessarily have to worry about these numbers per se. But generally, a mature animal can breed up to about 50 in terms of sheep, about 40 in terms of bucks, and depending on your operation, you can expand this or it might shrink. So if we are synchronizing estrus, where they all cycle at the exact same time, and they can all be bred at the exact same time, then our bucks and our rams cannot service as many. It's just impossible if you have, 75 animals in a field and they're all cycling right now. He can't serve them all right now. But if you're more of a operation where you throw your bucks out or your rams out and they're cycling at different times, you have a massive operation, then your ratio can switch just a little bit. All right, so with that, and with hopefully moving outside, the biggest points I want you to know is that we need to set our goals. So for you, why are we at a sale and what are we looking for? We want to talk about, or for our dams, we want to make sure we're looking at traits that are fertile and prolific, also fast growing. And then for sires, we kind of need to make a decision. Are we selecting him because we want him to contribute to replacement females, or are we selecting him because we want him to contribute to pounds of meat? With that, we'll take questions, or we can talk outside. For those of you that want to join us, we are going to go evaluate these bucks and see kind of what a setup looks like at a sale. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. In terms of what can happen, generally they're not going to be, there can, but it's not high unless you're doing that over and over, like we said earlier with the, so I wouldn't keep the offspring, but you can just continue till you, yeah.
Well, you can also loot them if you know that they were bred. So just like in cattle, just let it be. But yes. All right. For those that want to join, I'll meet you in the back. Otherwise, I'm the last speaker, so you guys can enjoy your day if you don't want to join us. These guys are smelly, so it's breeding season. Elias.